Hey, Nicole, were you planning on being a ride or die chick? Or did it all just fall apart when you knew Chriswatts was caught? I'm ARHayes, Convict's Thoughts. Let's deep dive. This is a completely heart-wrenching crime that happened back in 2018. Chriswatts. Nobody will ever forget it. This is not a crime that will ever leave people's minds, hearts, and souls. It will be talked about forever. Why? Most likely because of the loss of Bella and Celeste, and of course their mother, Shanann. Well, who could ever forget the unborn baby as well? Just a travesty. A husband takes the life of his entire family, all because of a mistress? And the worst case of all of it is that mistress that was most likely involved. And I'm just going by my gut feeling and pretty much many others. She was involved. She knew what was happening. She most likely was a part of what was happening. And at the end of the day, because Chriswatts actually admitted to the crime, while he was sitting in that little interrogation room confessing, it let her off the hook. So let's discuss it just a little bit, because I think many of you out there have the same feelings that I do. And it happens a lot. And I'll explain to you how I know it actually happens a lot, because I've been right there with many of men. They've committed horrific crimes just in the same category as this one, thinking that they had a sidekick, a girl that was going to ride right along with them and was going to actually stand by their side. Some did, many didn't. It looks like, Nicole, you got some cold feet. And you knew while you sat in that interrogation room right next to your father, the game was up. You can see it. You can see the wobbliness in your entire demeanor during your interrogation. It's obvious to the eyes of someone like me that's been around the block, but also many who just knew you were lying. Now, everybody, you got to kind of rewind even back prior to the crime happening. Nicole and Chris worked at the same company. So when she makes the claims that at the beginning she did not know Chriswatts was married, oh, he didn't wear his wedding ring to the office. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, we know that's false. We know that's false. That is not the way things happen. For some reason, affairs happen when you have relationships that are just not very strong. Chris and Shanann, his wife, seem to be having struggles. And I, in my opinion, believe that ties back to the fact that Chris most likely did not want to have 3 children. It also might just tie back to the fact him and Shanann just were not fully attracted to each other like they were back in the day. Sometimes, and I kind of learned this from my early age years with my adoptive father, those younger, or even, I don't know, it's just kind of people you work with, can wrestle in and cause some sort of affair. So when Nicole states during her actually interrogation that she did not know before all of this transpired that Chris was married, I just personally don't believe that. I just don't believe it. And I think in her mind, while she was actually talking in that interrogation room, she knew the investigators didn't believe it either. Now, one thing I want to break down for you, when something like this happens, and they bring numerous people into the interrogation room, one, you would not be sitting in that interrogation room if they didn't already know something that tied you into the actual crime. They want to get more information, not only just verbally from you. They don't want to just hear what you have to say. They want to see your actual reactions to their questioning. They ask those questions for a reason. Now, they typically start with beating around the bush and then finally get into the main cup of noodles of their questioning. But they're watching you the entire time. The beating around the bush questions is done for a reason. Can they see you relax a little bit? Will you get a little bit egotistical or cocky within your answers? Are you going to deflect everything away or maybe even shut down completely, stating that you need a lawyer? They have a direct path that they're trying to get to, and they're hoping that you're going to stumble up and give them the information that they're looking for. And like I said, it's not always just based upon what you have to say, even though that is key as well. If they could stumble you up during your wording of what you are trying to say, which typically happens, and if you look at Nicole's interrogation with the investigator, she overtalked herself. Now, what I mean by over-talking yourself is when you're trying to give a clear-cut answer or statement to an investigator, you don't just directly answer the question and shut up to wait for them to ask the very next one. You continue to try to explain the simple answer that you gave them. So when you go back and you watch Nicole in the interrogation room, it's not about the way that she drinks her water from her water bottle or the other things that people are pointing out that gives you the feeling that she's nervous or shaky. It's one simple fact that gives it all to you. She doesn't know when to shut up. She just keeps talking. Even her father has to cut in at times to help redirect what she's talking about. To me, it's even funny that a woman of that age has to have her dad in the interrogation room with her, but I believe the investigators actually did that on purpose. The reason why I feel like they did that on purpose is I believe they felt as though Nicole and her father had a good enough relationship that she most likely confided in him in discussions regarding the actual Chriswatts case of what happened. Now, I can't directly tell you how much he knows, but I have, by a gut feeling, by watching that interrogation, he knows enough that in some of his stoppage of her talking, in redirecting what the conversation was about, really kind of pertains to some very key information about her cell phone. If you really focus in, when they begin talking about that cell phone, it's like he's leading Nicole on where to go with that conversation. Now, he also butts in at times to ask the investigator certain questions, I think, to slow down the conversation. It's his way of slowing his daughter down to get her, to get the brain back working, to avoid saying certain things in the running of mouth situations. Now, I know it's a split room on whether people feel as though she's involved or not involved. But if I had to give you just my basic opinion, she's one of those females that gets into a relationship with a man knowing the man is still married, but hoping that she could overcome that and win the man's attention and love without actually breaking the marriage. I know people talk about the fact like she was researching wedding dresses. She was talking about all this stuff prior to the crime happening. Now, the research into the wedding dresses could be just a fantasy. And what I mean by that is, instead of actually having Chriswatts divorce his wife, leave his children, move in with her, and further into more of a relationship than just the sexual aspect or the so-called ruse of the affair, she could just fantasize about all of that while never legitimately have to take on the responsibility of a full-blown relationship. She even makes a statement that she didn't really want to move in with Chriswatts. She wanted him to get his own place with his children after divorcing his wife, to where she could have her own place and they could see each other a couple of nights a week. Sure, people that date do that. Spend a night at each other's place here or there, but they always have their own home, their own closet with their clothes hanging in it. Why? Because that's a safety net that if the relationship doesn't take off or go where you want it to be, you've never given up your own individuality or your own roof over your head. You've never fallen into the trap of reliance. So she wants to make it quite clear that the relationship that she had with Chriswatts was an independent relationship where they both were able to support themselves and never actually fall into the trap of living upon each other. Now, that also tells me, if she did know about this crime in advance, which I believe she did, just based off of the actions, the research done online, the different things that were said back and forth, the phone calls that were made back and forth before, during, and even after the actual crime transpired, she acted the part as if she was going to be that ride or die. I'm along with you no matter what happens, Chris. I'm going to be with you in regards to this because we are committing this crime literally together. That's why so many people actually believe she was at the crime scene when the murders happened. There's been a lot of study and a lot of research done by many that believe they literally have evidence she was at the crime scene when the murders happened. It's possible. It truly is. But the main key to all of this is I believe that they had a plan. That means Chris and Nicole had an upfront plan that if it seemed as though the shit hit the fan, that's a good way of putting it, but if it was coming to the point that Chris was found out to be involved as the actual catalyst of this murder, they were going to do everything possible within the two of them to ensure that Nicole did not get hemmed up at the same time as Chris. That's why Chris, when his entire interrogation fell apart and he's bawling like a little boy after failing a lie detector test he never even had to take. Ladies and gentlemen, you just don't take them. If you're an intelligent criminal, especially in a murder investigation, you do not take an actual lie detector test. And you would think Chriswatts would be smart enough about that. It's 2018, ladies and gentlemen. People know that lie detector tests are not even admissible into court. Why take one? What are you going to prove? Especially if you know it, you're involved, and you did it. Why are you going to take a lie detector test? You're going to get caught. The main reason why I could say you're going to get caught when it comes down to a lie detector test is because you'll never know whether you passed or failed. They're going to tell you failed, even if you didn't fail. And they'll even give you all the reasons why you failed. Oh, you were being dishonest at this point, your heart rate went up at this point, you seemed nervous, everything changed. You don't know that. Those lie detector tests are set up to ensure you don't pass. Because it's not the machine that tells you whether you pass or not. It's the interpreter of the actual test that's going to tell you where you pass or fail. That's why it's inadmissible. It's not exact science. It's not real or true. So why would Chriswatts or even other people, knowledgeably knowing that it's inadmissible and can't do anything to benefit you, why would you sit down to take the test to begin with? Especially when you know, and you and I all know, just by watching Chriswatts' interrogation, even prior to that test, he was not doing well. He was not convincing whatsoever. And that's what really, truly makes me, in my mind, focus in on the fact when he knew it was not going well, he knew he was nailed to the crime. They had him. Now, at that point, he's got to kick it into a whole nother gear to accomplish two things. Two things have to be accomplished at this point. One, he needs to divert the actual reasoning behind why he did what he did away from the factual reasoning of the affair and the tiredness of being married, the unwanting of the third child, all of the craziness in life. And he needs to divert that to the fact that his wife, Shanann, physically harmed their children, putting the blame on her. He's got to rotate that blame away from himself to create a lesser dynamic of the charge against him. Can he create a doubt as to why he committed the crime to lessen the charges and get less time? Two, he knows in his mind who was involved in this crime. So if Nicole was, let's just say, his ride or die girl, that he felt as though only was a part of this crime in support of him, and because of her love of him and his love of her, he now has to ensure that he protects her from any look or charges in the crime. And he can absolutely do that. I know a lot of people don't quite understand the reasoning for these interrogations and confessions by certain people, but it happens far more often than a lot of people understand. How do I know that? I've been housed with a lot of people that committed crimes with a significant other or someone that they were dating and in an affair with, and everything they did within their interrogation, confession, plea bargaining, everything they did was to keep a co-defendant, co-lover, co-sidekick, whatever you might want to deem it, out of the mix. It's a pretty simple way to do it. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell on myself, and I'm going to give you the information that you want, you need, against me, because I'm going to go ahead and take the full heat for this. I'm the one that did it. It's all me. It's all about what I did. You just have to let her go. So, if you notice with Nicole, her interrogation was not going well. It just wasn't. You can see it. It's very visually not going well. You could also tell by the evidence that started to come to the surface in regards to the internet searches, in regards to the fact that she's still talking with Chris even after the fact, to the point that he has her on the phone while he's talking to the actual interrogator and investigator on the phone. And you could tell that was all set up because it didn't work out on his own cell phone to begin with, so they had to use the company phone with her on another line at the exact same time for the exact amount of time as a phone call with the investigator. This shows you that Nicole had to be every step of the way involved in not only the processing and thinking of the crime, the planning of the actual crime, the committing of the crime, the overcoming of the emotions of the crime, to even covering up the plan and trying to get past the interrogators. It's obvious. It's clear as day. But many will argue to the sun, why did she not get arrested? Why is she not charged in this case? It's simple, ladies and gentlemen. It's simple. Chriswatts took the heat. The investigators and the interrogators were looking for one thing, and that was to solve this horrific crime and put Chriswatts, who they knew, once they started finding the information, and I think they even knew the minute that they came over and they saw the footage on the next door neighbor's TV of what his camera caught, they were already on to Chris. They were on to him. You could see Chris's demeanor the minute that video on that TV was playing. His shoulders slumped, and it was like a crushed, I'm going to talk too much moment. And he knew he was caught. Whether he could skedaddle that around for a while, who knows? But he knew he was caught. He knew he was done in. The wheels started to churn to find a way to keep Nicole out of the mix. And that's why Nicole, to this day, is in some sort of protective custody, protective, whatever they have her under, no longer in the area, completely out of view and hiddenness. It's all for a reason. If you weren't involved in the crime, and it can be proven you were not involved in the crime, you don't have to hide because of the crime. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Think about that very, very much. Think about how many crimes you've studied, researched, listened to, been guided by, to where you know people that have been around the crime were not involved right from the get-go, so they didn't have to hide. But think of all those crimes that you see that you have questions of, I think that person was involved. And right now, we have to bobble our head up and down. Nicole was involved. In my opinion. I better say that. In my opinion. But she'll never be charged. It's never going to happen. No matter what else comes out in this case is closed. They can do all the investigation. You and I could go find the actual 100% proof she was involved, and at this point, it's a done issue. You have Chriswatts serving forever and a day in the penitentiary plus another 84 years. He's not getting out. And Nicole is never getting charged. Do you think maybe she's one of those ladies that still writes Chriswatts? All those letters that he's getting from other women to this day that makes many people sick to their stomachs, knowing that he still is in the public women's eye as somebody they would want to engage with and write. Do you think Nicole just might be slipping him a letter or two? Think Nicole might just slip him a few dollars or two onto his books for his commissary? Maybe little bit of a, I don't support you, but man, I sure thank you for covering for me. It's pretty sad that a wife, 2 living children, 1 unborn child, all had to feel the wrath of what I consider to be a woman that wasn't looking for a happy marriage. It wasn't about the shopping online for that wedding dress for her. It was a fairy tale. It was a game. It was a man that I believe in her mind, she knew she could never have completely to herself as a real and true husband, especially with those children that he would most likely have, if not uh, half custody of. He would definitely be paying child support. And would he have had a large enough income to pay child support for 3 children and be able to support a home for her? Yes, people do it. I know it's capable of being done. But look at the individuals you're talking about. Are they capable of doing it? Was it an insurance fraud claim just in the waiting that could support them financially, yet never tie the knot? But Nicole would know that Chris, if he was capable of getting away with the actual crime, could get a substantial amount of an insurance fraud claim that he could in return spend on her, take her on luxury vacations, get her a nice luxury bike to ride and die on, maybe even help buy her a home. All in the fantasy world. Because we are intelligent enough to know to look at that situation. There was no future wedding happening between Nicole and Chris. It just wasn't going to be real. One, because Chris is already having an affair on his wife and what would be the cumulative of his 3 children as well. So what woman would tie the knot already knowing someone's doing that with them? But 2, flip that around. Do you think Nicole, who most likely knew Chris was married and cheating on his wife with her, is at all capable of holding down a relationship and being loyal to Chris? Doesn't sound like it. Just by her interrogation, the way she spoke, she wasn't serious to begin with. That's just another drop in the bucket when you look at the overall totality of how sickening the Chriswatts case is. This isn't just a man that got angry and took his wife's life. This isn't just a man that was able to take the lives of his 2 living, adorable children that is even stated he was a great father to. Then you had to pile on the fact this isn't just about the man that took the life of his newly coming unborn child, his 3rd. But now, to this day, he sits in the penitentiary and he spits out these things about finding God and working through this to overcome everything that he's been through. Yet, this is a man that still will sit down and pen letters to women across the country or world. He doesn't know, but he revels in the fact they all know him, and they all are just reveling at how much they love and cherish Chriswatts. For what? For what? What's lovable about it? What's lovable? He's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a murderer, and he's never, ever going to even be able to hold your hand. What's lovable about that? I've sat next to these guys in the chow hall of the penitentiary, and you know what? Just like they have an ego out on the streets, and everybody calls them narcissistic and egotistical and all those key words. Just imagine someone like myself who's pretty quiet, very private, stays to myself, and I sit down at my little assigned spot in the chow hall just to try to get a little bit of food in me to survive because I'm hungry. And I have to hear them ramble about all the girls that love them, all the girls that put money on their books. Thankfully, I was never sitting next to someone that was exactly like this man. But trust me, you sit beside many that are very, very close. And all you can do is just put your head down and walk away because they have nothing to do with you. But you sure hope that they slip up at some point. And if it's not you getting your hands on them, somebody will. And somebody will get their hands on Chriswatts. It's going to happen. When you take the lives of little kids like he did, it changes the entire dynamic of the way people view you. People in the penitentiary don't like that. That's why they had to move Chriswatts from Colorado all the way across the country to Wisconsin. Now, he's going to be able to be housed there for a short period of time, only a short period of time before they're going to have to pack him up and house him somewhere else. He will never, ever find a place where he can get comfortable, nor will he find a place where he can lay his head for a long, stable period of time. He's going to be moved a lot, especially if he continues to run his mouth. So, that's my opinion. Ride or die chick that she didn't ride or die. She got the heck off that bike the minute that she saw Chriswatts sinking. It was probably a pretty darn smart move. And I think Chriswatts was okay with that too, because he didn't want to bring her down with him. Just my opinion. ARHayes, A Convict's Thoughts. Chriswatts, a story we can talk about and talk about and talk about, and it will still hit home and break hearts day in and day out. Have a great night. See you again soon. Bye now.